Welcome back to Law and Crime's coverage of the Harvey Weinstein sex crimes trial in New York City. Law and Crime's Jesse Weber was in the courtroom to watch everything that happened for us today. He's live outside the courthouse for us right now in Lower Manhattan. Jesse, good to see you this morning. Tell us what went on.
Hey, Aaron, it's good to hear from you. What a day we've seen, and it's not even officially day one. So jury selection is going to happen starting tomorrow. Today was about all of these pretrial motions, how the trial is going to be set up. But even before you get there, we all got here at around 5:30, 5:40 in the morning, and it was a zoo. You have 150 journalists from all across the nation and also international as well. It just shows you the magnitude of this trial. Now, as you said, I was in the courtroom. I was actually in the row right behind Harvey Weinstein. So he comes into the courtroom, he has his walker, he laid on it during a significant period of time. An interesting thing to note was he was actually in the front row, and then when the judge came in, he was moved towards the defense table. He had an interaction with Donna Rotuno, they had a few words, some laughs, and then the proceedings began. And we learned a lot today during the motions. The first thing was about discovery. As you know, discovery is what information is given to the other side, and the defense kind of lost that bid. They were saying that there was a ton of information from the state that was unredacted. They wanted their hands on it, and the judge said no. That was a big blow to them. We also learned that there is going to be no jury sequestration. Now, in other words, this jury is not going to be confined to a hotel room. They're not going to be confined in a way where they don't know what's happening on the outside. I got to say that was surprising because the judge didn't even give an explanation for why that happened. What ultimately happened is Arthur Aidala, who is one of the attorneys representing Weinstein, actually made that request, and before the prosecution even had an opportunity to interrupt, the judge said, let me get this straight, denied, and just denied it straightforward without really an explanation. It should also be noted that this judge said he will not discuss the other cases that might be pending in other jurisdictions. That was one of the reasons for the jury sequestration. And there was another big moment when there was no gag order put on the attorneys in this case. As you know, both sides, particularly the defense, has been very vocal during this trial. And Donna Rotuno was actually called out by the prosecutor specifically. The idea here that she was speaking bad and degrading the witnesses that are going to be coming forward. And there was a back and forth. She defended herself. At the end, the judge said that he's not putting a gag order, but just to be careful with what is said. Now, as you can see, though, it doesn't stop press conferences outside the courthouse nonetheless. There was another moment when we're talking about how the jury is going to be selected. This is going to be quite the process that will last several weeks. There are two batches of jurors. First, you're going to have jurors that actually opted in to try to become jurors on this case and see if they're can be impartial, and then you're going to have a whole set of jurors to determine why they shouldn't be a part of this jury. Ultimately, you're going to need 18 jurors, 12, and then 6 alternates. It's a heavy task given the high publicity of this case and the Me Too movement. There was another moment in this case that should be mentioned as well. For anybody who's followed the Harvey Weinstein case, the term Black Cube should sound very familiar. This is that investigative firm that Harvey Weinstein allegedly used to target witnesses, to speak to them before they came forward. Now, that was brought up during a discussion, and in fact, one of Harvey Weinstein's former attorneys, David Boies, may be called to the stand to talk about Black Cube and what happened. Now, that is just a taste of some of the things that happened during these motion hearings, but at the end of the day, this is going to continue tomorrow at 9:30 a.m.
Yeah, Jesse, that's really interesting about the gag order, because here's the way it works from an attorney ethics standpoint, as you well know, because we're both licensed attorneys. Oftentimes, defense attorneys get long leashes from judges because judges turn around and say, well, look, I mean, if the prosecution's been out there, if the accusers have been out there basically making their case in the public eye, which absolutely, certainly has been happening here, then the defense ought to be able to say at least something in defense of the client. And basically, the judge let that go here. That's the way it's going to proceed.
Aaron, that's right. That's what we usually see. And given that this case is highly unique, it did seem a bit strange that there was no gag order, but it should be noted that there was an interesting moment where she was accused, Donna Rotuno was accused of actually taking or speaking about materials that were sealed. And she says, I did not do that. The media has their own access to materials. I merely just commented. And one of the common themes that we heard throughout the defense was that Harvey Weinstein needs to put forward a strong defense, and he is entitled to a strong defense because, after all, he's battling not only in the court of law, but the court of public opinion as well. So they felt there was a moment earlier on in the courtroom when Prosecutor Luzzi blatantly called Harvey Weinstein a predator. There was an objection that was later brought up by the defense and said, well, if you can call him a predator, then we should be able to characterize the witnesses as actresses or in a certain way he's allowed to a defense.
Yeah, I mean, so many accusations going around here. And I have to wonder, Jesse, your thoughts on that accusation, that verbiage that Weinstein is a predator. Well, bottom line, that's one of the charges here. I've got the list of them right in front of me here. It's predatory sexual assault. So the prosecution has legally charged Harvey Weinstein with being a predator. The defense is saying it's somehow disingenuous to call him what the charge is. It's a little bit of a logical leap, perhaps, for the defense. What's your take?
Aaron, we stand in front of a court of law, and Harvey Weinstein is innocent until proven guilty. He is an alleged predator. Now, this is probably not going to be the last time we see fireworks between both the defense and the prosecution. It's going to get ugly, I believe, at different points in this case. It should be noted that a lot of how this case is going to unfold, particularly the witnesses and what exhibits are going to be shown, it seemed today that both sides were keeping it pretty close to the vest, and that we're not entirely sure which side is going to present which witnesses and who's going to be called, which is interesting because this is kind of these surprise attacks on both sides. But yes, for him to be called a predator and for one of the witnesses to be called an actress, this is just some of the terminology that has been used so far in this open court. It did lead to the judge to step in and to restrict both sides. He did seem to be very critical of this process, and it appears that while this is going to be an arduous and a long trial, 6 to 8 weeks once it starts up, the judge is going to keep to a very strict schedule and try to keep as much peace between the parties as possible. Yeah,
let's hope. I mean, ultimately, that's the judge's job here, too. Jesse, I've got to ask you about this, too. This happened late yesterday on Sunday. Harvey Weinstein sent an email to CNN answering written questions on the eve of this proceeding, which is basically the eve of the trial itself, the jury selection. And one of the questions he was asked is what basically he had to say to the accusers. And he said, while I do have many empathetic opinions regarding many people, I'm following the advice of my lawyers on the eve of my trial to not offer any commentary on this. It was sort of a non-response. Has there been any buzz about that there this morning, that Weinstein himself is talking about meditation helping him, talking about, well, if I beat these charges, I want to try to get back into the movie business, that he says he has empathetic opinions regarding many people but won't directly address the accusers? Any buzz about that at all?
Well, Aaron, it wasn't directly addressed today in court, that specific issue, but it kind of was the subtext, especially when we talked about the gag order and what is said in public and what is not said. Look, Harvey Weinstein, if anything I saw in that courtroom, he has an active role in his defense, and he is not going to be shying away from it. There was a moment when it was another point that was discussed about can he leave the state or not, and there was a discussion about, well, can he go to his home in Connecticut? Well, there seemed to be a miscommunication between him and his attorneys, because his attorney said, well, we concede that he will restrict himself to Connecticut only on the weekends. He actually spoke out in open court and said, no, weeks too. And then they had a discussion. The judge said, listen, if the bail bondsman says it's okay and he can be in Connecticut during the week and the weekend, that's fine. But what it appears is that this is a man who has always been in control of his own life and his own business. He's gone through 3 different legal teams, possibly for a certain reason, and it doesn't appear that he's going to take a backseat to any of this. He appears to have an active role in how this defense is going to go, and apparently he wants to give his side of the story out there. We had the opportunity to interview several of his accusers, and I remember one of them, I believe it was Erica Rosenbaum, said that if she had the opportunity, to interview him or to ask him a question, she would say, you're a storyteller. Do you see yourself as the good guy or the bad guy in this story? And that, I'm paraphrasing there, but again, how does he see himself and what side does he want to present? As we talked about earlier, he has come in a very frail state. There have been speculation about, is that true? Is it not? Is he faking it? From my account, it appeared to be that he was recovering from back surgery. But at this point, he does appear to be vocal and will step up in a courtroom and speak out if he feels something's wrong.
It leads to many questions, Jesse, as to whether or not he's going to indeed take the stand defendant turned this into a literal he said and then many, many she saids in the courtroom. We could speculate about that forever, but I want to go back to a word that was used in one of those news conferences outside the courtroom, cult of celebrity. There's a high-profile movie producer on trial here. He's facing serious accusations, and the accusers are many well-known actresses. You sat in the courtroom today. Is it a cult of celebrity hovering over that courtroom, and how do you think that affected the proceeding?
Aaron, that's a great question. I should just tell everybody that in the courtroom, there were no actresses. It was mostly media. Now, as the trial progresses, as we see certain witnesses testify, they may have family and friends, and there may be celebrities that enter that courtroom. Today, again, was more of a housekeeping matter. Having said that, you can't forget that when Harvey Weinstein walks into a room, there's a lot attached to him. When he walked into that courtroom, the entire courtroom went silent and just stared at him. Now, this case, and I'll say it once, I've said it once, I'll say it again. This might be the most high-profile case that we have ever seen since O.J. Simpson. There's a reason for this. Not only is Harvey Weinstein implicated in a number of different sexual misconduct cases, but also the impact of what this verdict will ultimately mean will carry weight forever. It has already changed the entertainment industry. It has already changed the workplace industry, and it has already changed how we look at the power and power dynamics. So no matter what ultimately happens in this courtroom, we're already making note of this. Now, having said this, this was a man the Golden Globes were on yesterday. You have to imagine, was he watching the Golden Globes yesterday, thinking of what his life was like years ago and thinking how far has he fallen? This was the powerhouse of entertainment. Meryl Streep called him God. She called him that for a reason. So when Harvey Weinstein maybe takes the stand, probably won't, don't think it's a great idea, if you were to do that, the whole world will be already watching, but even watching even more.
Yeah, we wish we could literally watch it. Of course we can't. Jesse, one more quick question. I have to ask this one. I've been thinking about this with my attorney hat on, since we're both licensed attorneys here. Is there any sense that this is going to turn into a literal referendum or a literal trial of the Me Too movement in that courtroom? Because we all know that that's the discussion outside that room. But is there a risk if prosecutors try to turn this into the Me Too trial? Do they utter that word in the courtroom? Or does the defense utter it in the courtroom? Do you think that strategy would be wise for either side?
Aaron, I don't know if that would be a great idea. You always want to keep it to the facts and circumstances of the case at hand. Having said that, one of the reasons jury selection is going to take so long, it's going to be very hard to find a juror that doesn't know about the Me Too movement or is not familiar with it. There have also been reports or concerns that people will be trying to get onto this jury because they are pro-Me Too and want to deliver a guilty verdict. That's not what you want. You want an impartial verdict. You want an impartial jury and an impartial verdict from both sides, whether the prosecution or the defense. Now, will they mention that in an opening statement? Possibly. Because at the one hand, yes, you want to base it just upon the two women that are part of this indictment, but let's not forget, as we heard throughout the press conferences and as this trial is progressing, more women are going to testify as well. And the more they testify, the more the flavor of this Me Too movement and ultimately what he is accused of will come to the surface.
Yeah, you know, it's a risky strategy to try to do it that way, but ultimately you might have to utter that word to try to get a fair jury, to try to weed out someone who may have strong feelings or attachments to the movement itself, because if you know about the movement, you know about Harvey Weinstein. Law&Crime's Jesse Weber, I know you'll be reporting throughout the day live from the courthouse. Thanks for joining us this morning. We need to take a break. We'll be back with more about the Harvey Weinstein trial right after this.